Hi, everyone. Again, Stephanie with the patient story and with Ivy, who has already spent so much time graciously with us talking about the first video, how she got diagnosed. And then, Ivy, of course, you just got done talking about the targeted therapies and your lobectomy, which happened right before COVID hit. And I was reading how you were talking about how grateful you were to be able to get that done. Because as we know, COVID has impacted so many other people and their ability to get treatment. Before we go into your advocacy work, I want to talk about a couple topics here. One, you had just mentioned about mental health in
Mhm.
therapy. And I think it cannot be overstated how important this aspect is of
Mhm.
any, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or something else, right? Can you talk about, in the context of, talking to people who are watching and reading this, who maybe aren't aware of the importance of taking care of your mental health in this situation, just any guidance you have there?
Oh, sure. And I have to tell you, I think it is critical to make sure that, you take care of your mental health as well as your physical health if you go through something like a cancer diagnosis. And you shouldn't, feel in any way ashamed or like you don't want to ask for help because my gosh, I mean, a cancer diagnosis is a big deal. And people, I mean, shouldn't feel like they need to know how to handle that. I mean, if anything, it's a huge, huge stressor. So, I mean, I cannot imagine having been able to handle, living with lung cancer for over 7 years without having a therapist, without having being on an antidepressant. I mean, it has really kind of helped me be able to keep myself in a good, stable mindset, in addition to being stable with my cancer, so that I can live a good life and, balance. Like, you don't want the cancer to become your entire life. So
Yeah.
I'm able to talk about other things and be here for my husband and my kids and my friends and
Yeah.
my 89-year-old mom. I mean, it really take the impact. I can't underestimate the impact of taking care of my mental health, because it's made it so that I'm not just surviving with cancer. I'm actually living my life
Yep.
fully with
Yep.
cancer. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't made that a priority.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tending to yourself, first and foremost, not just physically, but mentally. So thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned your husband, you mentioned your kids and your mom. I want to start with your husband because, as we
Mhm.
know, any major life event can have huge impacts on relationships, like a marriage. Any guidance to people on how to deal with it? Because suddenly your spouse or your partner is no longer just that role or a co-parent or anything. It also a
Mhm.
caregiver. Yeah, any advice on that and navigating that?
I think you have to have patience with each other, and I think you have to talk about things. I mean, it was very hard at the very beginning when I was first diagnosed, other than, I mean, in addition to the fact that, oh my God, for him, his wife had just been diagnosed with lung cancer. I also couldn't drive because I was wearing a neck brace and I was a stay at home mom at that point. So, he had to, kind of take over a lot of things that he hadn't been doing. And he had to help coordinate, rides for our kids and do a whole bunch of other stuff that, I wasn't, able to do for a while. But then on the flip side, once I started feeling better, I wanted all that back. So that was also difficult because he had kind of gotten used to being an active helper. And then all of a sudden, I didn't want that anymore. So, those are things that, can cause stress in anyone's marriage. And in order to kind of get through things like that, we just learned that we really had to kind of talk it out and try to understand how each of us were thinking about things and try to put ourselves into each other's shoes. And, with a lot of patience, we've managed to work through, issues like that when when they've arose.
Thank you for highlighting that because these are the things that I think We can only learn through the actual experience of going through cancer and marriage. I'm hearing communication, of course, is always really
Mhm.
key here. How about with the kids? I know your two sons were, I mean, about 10 and 12 or so at the time. And then how did you end up handling that in terms of telling them, mommy has cancer, or, explaining all the different doctor's appointments?
Right, right. Once I had that conversation with my oncologist nurse when she told me that I was going to be going on an oral medication, that's when we decided that we were going to tell the kids what was going on. And yeah, they were 10 and 12, because we wanted to make sure that they knew that there was a plan and what the plan was going to be. So we sat down and we told them, which, to be honest, was probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever done in my life, because you kind of feel like you're ripping their innocence away, they're kids and they never think anything's going to happen to their parents. And then they, found out that I had lung cancer. So we have always though tried to be honest with them, but not give them information until we know the next plan. Even when I progressed, until I knew, what was going to happen, there was no need to kind of go into all of those details with them. So I guess we have tried to we, of course, will answer any questions, open questions, and all that. But, we try not to create concern without addressing what the next plan is. Now, we also found kind of early on that the boys didn't really want to ask me questions about what I was going through. They wanted to ask my husband instead, because they were afraid that they would upset me, or they would say it the wrong way. So they tended to go to him more to ask questions about what I was going through. But that was fine. And again, two boys, two different personalities. One was more comfortable talking about things, one wasn't. And you have to kind of take your cues from that and address each child
Right.
kind of with what they need, or one you might have to go to ask, do you have any questions, what are you thinking? And one might just be blurting it out at the breakfast table, so you kind of have to go with their cues, really.
Wow, those are such great nuggets in there. So thank you for sharing that. I'm hearing a lot of things, but one of the things that was really interesting was, yes, be very upfront. You and your husband were very upfront with your sons, but also wanted to be mindful of, do we have an answer for that? So it's not lobbing something at them with a million questions and not having some plan of action in place. So that
Exactly.
makes so much sense. Now, in terms of, I do want to start heading into the advocacy. And of course, advocacy means finding a cancer community. I want to kind of start backwards there. It can be very isolating, especially if you're diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, right? Again, it's something that a lot of people don't think about. How did you deal with that? Were you able to find a cancer community, or was it not until you became an advocate yourself when you were able to make those connections?
I was fairly early on. I wasn't ready for it when I was first diagnosed. I have to tell you, because different people are ready to connect with others at different times, and I needed some time to kind of, I don't know, just grieve. I think the fact that my life was going to be different from what I expected, and that I needed a cancer community. But in general, I am more of an extrovert. So after, a certain period of months, I reached back out to the woman who I had been introduced to, who lives near me, who also has lung cancer and is now one of my dearest friends and partner in advocacy. And through her, I ended up getting connected with the Longevity Foundation, which is a major patient advocacy group in lung cancer. And they had a local walk that I participated in and met some people locally initially. And then after some time, I went to one of their big summit events that they have each year in Washington, D.C., and met some more people. And as that occurred, and I met more people who were part of the lung cancer community and living with lung cancer, I actually began to feel an even more sense of hope and potential for my future, because I was meeting people who were, living well with lung cancer, who were living very, long term good lives. And I also started to learn about, advocacy opportunities and how, I could help other people, which kind of made me feel like I had a purpose. So that was really important to me too, to kind of take what I had learned from talking to other people who had helped me along the way and pass it along to others. So
Right.
that's why I first got involved in advocacy. But as time kind of went on in advocacy, I found that what I really, really liked was learning more about the research.
Mm.
Now, just quickly about my background, I have absolutely a completely non-scientific background, okay? I was an English major as an undergrad. I have an MBA in finance. So there's no science, there other than the required classes.
Right.
But, once you're diagnosed, with a disease, or at least for me, once I was diagnosed with the disease, I wanted to learn all about it. And then once I learned, as much as I could through attending conferences and things like that, I wanted to be able to help. So there were various different programs that you can participate in as a patient through the Department of Defense as a consumer reviewer, through ASCO and AACR, where you can help provide your patient perspective in research. So I started doing those programs. And then in 2017, I co founded, along with six other patients and a caregiver, the EGFR resistors lung cancer patient group, which is an advocacy group completely patient founded and patient driven for people like myself who have EGFR positive lung cancer. So this group kind of we pretty much are an online patient community. We've grown since our very beginnings of, just seven of us to about 2,500 people now from 75 different countries. And we have a closed Facebook group where members who are patients and caregivers can interact. They can learn from each other, support each other, learn to advocate for themselves. We share tons of information in this group about things like second opinions and clinical trials and symptom management and everything. But we also are trying to help accelerate research in our own type of lung cancer. So we've partnered with other advocacy groups and industry organizations to actually do research on our own disease, and also to raise funds to sponsor additional research. So it's been a very, very fulfilling way for me to get involved in the lung cancer community and both make a difference in other patients' lives, and then hopefully in the ultimate detection, diagnosis, and treatment of lung cancer as a whole.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such great work, Ivy, and we'll make sure to put the link to the EGFR resistors page and the Facebook group if you want on
Oh,
the
yeah, love that.
platform.
Mhm.
But to your point, you live this, right? I mean, you benefited from these two targeted therapies that, of course, wouldn't
Mhm.
be possible without pushing for the research and getting the funding. And so that's why it's so important, right? It's your living, breathing proof of how important it is.
Right, right. And if it wasn't for this research, I wouldn't be here right now. And I fully know it. I mean, I had the benefit of these two targeted therapies. Both were FDA approved literally months before I started taking them. I mean, surgery is still kind of a cutting edge thing to do in stage 4 patients. I mean, I can see what difference, these research and developments can make for people. So, I can't, tell you how incredibly important I feel like it is to focus and promote more research.
Absolutely. I just have two last questions for you. And the first is, I know you were just at the World Conference on Lung Cancer this last week, and very active. What are the top one or two things? And I know this is hard, but that is really the focus right now in terms of lung cancer research and treatments and therapies that maybe our patients and caregivers would be interested in.
I would think one of the biggest things is resistance. And resistance to treatment is, for any type of treatment you have. It could be whether it's targeted therapy, it could be chemotherapy, it could be immunotherapy. Eventually, somehow, the cancer kind of figures out a way to change. I mean, not always, but very, very frequently, and gets around the treatment, making it necessary to find a new treatment. So that's a big issue right now in cancer research. I mean, yes, we keep, developing new treatments to tackle resistance, trying to figure out what's driving the resistance and how to tackle it. But there's also starting to be more and more studies on why is resistance happening? What is it? Are there some cells that just can never disappear, that kind of go into a sleep mode, and they're called persister cells that then pop up, later on? What causes that to happen? So that's a really, really big topic in lung cancer right now. And I think the other really big topic is just an increased use of precision medicine. There's more and more, different subsets of lung cancer that have been uncovered, and different types of lung cancer are treated differently. Not every type of lung cancer responds the best to the same treatment. So there's been a lot done in terms of finding different, mutations like EGFR, like I have, but there's also work being done in terms of immunotherapy and how to find out which the best candidates are for responding to particularly different types of immunotherapy. And I really think that that's another focus right now that we're seeing in lung cancer, is kind of narrowing down who responds the best to certain treatments, so that people who are diagnosed can start with the best treatment right up, front.
Right, right.
And if I can add one more
Yes,
thing to,
please.
also paying more attention to some of the rarer types and subsets of lung cancer, like small cell lung cancer, is often very, very deadly, but hard to treat. But I'm starting to see a lot more about small cell lung cancer in development. Squamous cell lung cancer is another one. Leptomeningeal disease, which affects the brain, which is difficult to treat. So advances in some of these more difficult to treat subsets of lung cancer is, those are becoming more and more important and being looked into, with increased amounts of research as well.
Which is so wonderful, right? It's like the smaller populations that might not have been getting as much attention. Sounds like there's more focus, so that's always good
Yeah.
news.
Yeah.
My very last question, because you've just covered everything today with us, is really open-ended. It's like a one final message you'd like to share to the patients, the caregivers, other survivors who are watching this today.
Think, let's see, the biggest message that I can share is just, I think, the message of hope, to tell you the truth. I mean, things have changed so much in lung cancer in the 7 years since I was first diagnosed. And 7 years isn't that long in the grand scheme of things. When I was first diagnosed, I mean, immunotherapy didn't even exist. It was kind of like science fiction. I mean, people were talking about it, but they didn't know what kind of promise that would have. Half of the mutations that are now being, tested for in lung cancer hadn't even been discovered yet. And if you go back beyond my 7 years, another decade, all lung cancer patients were pretty much treated with the same one or two chemotherapy drugs. So, in such a relative short time, we have come so far. I think, this is kind of, a good time to be, a lung cancer patient. If end up being a lung cancer patient, is so many developments and there are so many new ideas, and patients are living longer and better with lung cancer because of these new treatments, and there's such a potential for more upcoming treatments.
I mean, that's such great perspective. As you said, you've been living, it's been 7 years since you were first diagnosed, so many rapid developments. You're now on the forefront too. I love speaking with patient advocates because you're, this sort of, you're in between. You're a great sort of voice where you're talking about the research, but in a way that patients and caregivers can understand. And you know what everyone cares about because you're living it. So I want to say thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for sharing your story so in depth with us today.
Oh, you're
And I
welcome.
look
It's my
forward,
pleasure.
yeah, and I look forward to seeing the work that you continue to do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story and my advocacy work. I appreciate it.
100%. And everyone, you can check out Ivy's story on thepatientstory.com. Again, we'll link to the group that Ivy co-founded, EGFR Resistors, where you can see all the work that they're doing, as well as I know there's a lot of communities on social media. So we'll make sure to plug all of that. But Ivy, great talking to you, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.